Yes, I think we can begin. So, welcome everyone on Masterclass on Moot Courts organized by Memo Pandits and Lex Auxilium. Okay. So, a couple of things which I would request from all of you. First of all, the question answer session would be at the end. So, please reserve all your questions. Yeah, just reserve all your questions till the end. And we will just be rest assured that we will be answering all the questions which you have. Just a second. Am I audible? Is my voice clear? Can everybody tell me on the chat if I'm audible or not? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. Perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much for the response. So I would like to introduce Debayan Gupta, who is a graduate of National Law University, Odisha, batch of 2017. He is currently a program manager with the Center for Policy Research, CPR. He works with communities that are affected by developmental projects in Chhattisgarh and Uttara Kannada in Karnataka. His mooting achievements include a lot of experience from Philip C. Jessup, which, as we all know, is known as the um, World Cup of Mooting. His team was the winner of the Indian rounds in 2016 and 17, I think, and and his team was also the semi-finalist at the Jessup World Rounds in 2017. Apart from that, he has coached a couple of teams. He has also done a couple of other moves. So, without wasting more time, I think what we should do is we should first begin with we should welcome Debayan Gupta, and I'm really thankful to Debayan Gupta for um, taking out time to address the questions of all the students who are present with us today. So welcome, Debayan.
Likewise, Anand, thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah.
I would be delighted to help out in whichever manner I can.
So the structure of today's webinar would be in this manner. I would be asking Debayan a couple of questions which most students would be wondering about. Like, these questions are based on the public demand of all of you. So after I'm done with all of those questions, then we will open the chat window for a question answer session in which you can ask any and all questions related to international moves to Debayan Gupta. So for now, I am just going to disable the chat window so that there is minimum interruption. And so let's begin. So Debayan, the first question which we have is, uh, as you know, as any mooter who has done, let's say, a couple of moves, that person would get an idea of the difference between international moots which happen in India and international moots which happen outside. For example, let's take the example of Jessup, and let's take the example of any tier 2 or tier 3 new moot which happens in India. So can you tell me what kind of difference would any mooter see when they travel abroad, when they participate in sophisticated moves like Jessup, and when they participate in a new upcoming international move which happens in India?
See, right off the bat, when you're talking about the international rounds as compared to the India rounds, even in some of these larger international law moves which have India rounds, the difference in the quality between the India rounds and international rounds are quite stark. I mean, to some extent, that isn't the case as much maybe for moods like Oxford Prize or moods like Jessup, which have now streamlined their national rounds as well. But
Hmm.
otherwise, there are moods which are international moods, but their India round standards, like the quality of judging, may not be as great. I mean, that is one of the primary differences, which is even why the India rounds is treated as a bigger hurdle as compared to the international rounds, wherein the judges know a lot more. They've participated in these moots over a long period of time, and they've been involved with these moot court competitions. And as a result, the quality and the standard of judging most definitely is quite different. And other than that, I think another added advantage of the international rounds is the chance to get to meet a lot of people from various parts of the world, and which may not be the case in some of the smaller tier 2 tier 3 international moots which we're talking of, because since they've just started out, the participation may not be as diverse in as is in some of these other moot court competitions. And other than that, I guess the richness and the quality of the problem and the kind of details that the international moots, the larger international moots, the details that are there in the problems, the intricacies, all of those may not be as prevalent in the tier 2 and tier 3 Indian
Yeah.
law moots.
Because I've also heard that when Jessup, like for example, let's take the example of Jessup, when the moot proposition of a moot like Jessup is being drafted, they take significantly longer than any moot which happens in India. So probably the quality of the moot proposition would differ. The quality of the judges would definitely differ. So when you participated in Jessup and when you were competing in India and then you competed abroad, uh, what did you find about the quality of judges? I know that you told me that there is a difference, but was the difference huge, and was the difference positive? And just share a bit about your experience also.
So thankfully, the year.
Deban, I'm very sorry to interrupt you. I think the hinge of your laptop is a little is yeah,
Does that work?
it's fumbling a bit. Huh, it was
Oh yeah,
fumbling.
that's because the table is being chewed on, so
Okay. Got it. No issues.
do anything
Yeah.
there. Right. So one added advantage that I would say in the year that we participated in Jessup was that ILSA was just about, which is the International Law Students Association, which organizes the Jessup Moot Court competition. They were just about taking over the organization. Like that was the transitional year. And since our year, the moots being organized more or less entirely by ILSA. So as a result, we had certain judges from the international rounds present in our India rounds. And
Okay.
it, it's basically the kind of nuances in the way they approach the problem, the kind of questions they ask, and the points that they judge you on. I mean, one major problem that there is that is prevalent in a lot of these international moot court competitions is the extreme dependence on your spoken English being very good, as a result of which oftentimes the value and the weight of your arguments get lost. But in the international rounds, it is known that there are countries in which English is not the primary language of communication, and as a result, that factor is taken a little bit out of the equation. And so that is an important way in which there is a difference between these moods as well. And the judges are more appreciative. They aren't, they've read the problems. It's not like they're going in with a day's briefing or a couple of hours of briefing. They've actually read up in advance. They're aware of what is going on in the relevant field. So it's basically, I guess, the organizers. I mean, the way the moot is organized, I think that makes a difference in
Got it. So
situations.
it sounds like the international rounds are judged on better parameters. They are judged by people who are actually interested in the moot proposition more than just the verbal English of the participants, which might actually be a very good thing, and that's something which is missing in Indian moots based on international law. So that's actually a good point. Okay, so another thing is, a lot of students, when they first participate in international moot court competitions, they have a question about the coach and the mentor which they should have for a particular moot. So, can I ask, what was your first international moot?
My first international moot was Oxford Prize Media,
Okay.
2015-16.
And when was this? Which year was this?
This was 15-16.
Uh, then you were in your third year.
Yeah, third year. Third
Third
year,
year. So,
basically, when I started mooting. So,
okay, so around that time, like when you picked up your first international moot, did you have a feeling to to get a mentor, and did you feel like without a mentor it would be very difficult for you to proceed? Was that the case?
yeah, I mean, going into while we were looking to prep for the moot, we realized that since it is a vast area that we have to cover, some guidance could have been useful. Unfortunately, back then in our university, no one had really gotten through, like, they hadn't really done too well back then in this move. So we didn't really have anyone to turn to back then. And since we were starting out then, we didn't really have that far thought of reaching out to other universities and students
Mm-hmm.
from other
Yeah,
universities.
that's actually a very good point, because a lot of times when students are in universities, jahan pe the alumni has not participated a lot in moot court competitions, they often think that they cannot approach mentors from other colleges,
Yeah.
which actually is a very big misconception, because a lot of students, a lot of alumni of other colleges are willing to mentor and coach students of other colleges. That actually happens. So that's actually a very good point.
Yeah, I mean, I myself have coached students from my own university. I've also officially coached and helped out students from other universities as well. And I mean, you have to trust that that person will not, if he's helping you and if he or she has agreed to join on as your coach, you will have to trust that that person will not be leaking out your arguments to whichever university he is an alumnus of.
True, true, true. Actually, this was one of the main reasons why we at Memo Pandit started with the Moot mentorship program, so that there is a systematic procedure through which all interested Moot teams who do not have a lot of people to back, like to fall on, those students can take up mentorship from people like you, people like from people who have actually judged Jessup international moot court competition rounds. So yeah, basically, what I get from your answer is that coach and mentor for a particular moot court competition may be a good decision, especially if you are just starting out to moot, right?
Yeah, I mean, even if you're not just starting out, even if you have considerable experience,
Hmm, hmm, hmm.
I mean, there's a reason these moots are actually giving you the option of having a coach or a mentor. And this is not only important for you in your own India rounds or your qualifying rounds, but the international teams. When you, I mean, the ultimate aim is to qualify and go to the international rounds and do well there. And most international universities do have people helping them out as coaches and mentors. So I think utilizing that space. I mean, most
Hmm.
domestic moots and most international moots in India don't really give you that space to have an official mentor or the title of an official mentor or a coach, which these international moots do.
Got it. Got it. Okay, so one of the most asked questions is that if a student is in the first year or in the second year, then should that student ever think of picking up a moot which is based on international law? Because from what I know is that most universities have the in their curriculum, international law comes around third year or fourth year. So would it be wise for any student to pick up an international moot, and even a sophisticated international moot, if not a tier 2 tier 3 moot in India? Would it be wise to pick up a moot like Jessup, and go for it right when they are just starting to moot in law school?
Well, one major thing, one major response to that would be that the big scale, the large scale international moots like Jessup or Stetson or Oxford Prize, these moots require a lot of your time, effort, and energy. And whether in your first year you are in the headspace to be able to provide that sort of dedication, and if you think that you have that sort of an understanding to go ahead with preparing for a moot like this, I mean, it's not that you cannot do it. I mean, there are teams in the first year which have gone on to qualify for international rounds in the past as well. So it's not that it's not doable, but it's just that if you are doing it, you have to realize that as a first year student who does not know the law at all, the amount of effort that you have to put in first understanding the nuances of the law and then the moot and then participating in it would require a lot of effort. So if you're ready to do that and put that amount of effort and hard work in, then then it's okay. And another thing that I would like to add is that you have to keep like you have to keep your mind open in your first year, and by chance if you do not manage to do well in your first attempt, getting discouraged at that stage may not be the best way to go about thing, and maybe learning from your experience in your first year and then using it in a subsequent year to try again would be a better way to go about things.
Got it, got it. So, from your experience, when you were participating in the international rounds of Jessup, if you did you talk to any competing moot teams, and did you try to find out the average year in which the students were from? Like, can you give us an idea ki they were from the second, third, or fourth? Like, what was the general trend?
Well, since a lot of like the foreign universities, they don't necessarily follow the
The
same kind
5 year
of education system as we do. So in some cases, like in the US, for example, law is something you can only do after you have a graduation degree. And similarly, so and even otherwise, there were actually a few PhD students also. I remember there were a few PhD students from Poland who were participating when we were there. And similarly, there were also first year students in teams from across the world. So, I mean, there was like a pretty large age range, but yeah, so it was a varied age range. I mean, you can't really
Okay, okay.
put it per se.
Got it, got it. So, and when you were participating, yeah, so just one additional question to that. When you were participating in the national rounds of Jessup, then did you notice any trend? Ki, what was the average year of the students?
It was probably, if you have to put an average on it, it would probably be around third or fourth year students mostly.
Okay.
Um, all of us were in our fifth year, and yeah, I think it was mostly third and fourth years.
Okay.
If I
Okay. Okay. And a while ago, you mentioned that in the first year, if you are participating, if you are thinking of participating in a moot court, in an international moot court competition, then you definitely have to think about the time which you're going to invest. So I would need you to share your experience for every international moot which you've done. I think you've done Oxford Prize Media, Jessup. Was there any other international moot which you did?
other than that, I've just coached. So
Okay. So can you tell us the time period which you guys invested, which your team invested for participating in these moot court competitions, so that the participants have an idea about how much they need to invest so that they can achieve what you might have achieved, like what they can achieve. So like
I
a
think
very on a very general scale, if you can give us an idea.
So I think I can draw a comparison between my price media prep and my Jessup prep, because for Jessup it was a more well thought out and strategic process and thinking that went into the preparation of the whole thing. Whereas in price media, since it was our first international moot and we didn't necessarily have a lot of guidance back then, so we basically did like a little reading maybe before the problem release, and after the problem release we just went all into it. But contrastingly for Jessup, I remember, because I was coming in from doing international human rights in price media, which is a very limited aspect. And my international law was not as strong as my other teammates. So I remember we actually broken down the moot prep into a couple of phases. So most of these international moots, you know that the problem releases in a particular month. So the month is more or less roughly known. But so a few months before that is when your pre-moot prep starts. So even before your problem releases, there's actually a good 2-3 month period that you have to put in just brushing up on a basic international law. And once and only once you cover basic international law, which includes reading the law, reading a few important case laws, which are basically the holy grail, so a few of them, and important statutes, etc. So all of these, and then going into thematic research specific to the theme of whichever moot you are prepping for. And then once problem releases, that's basically, then it basically goes into the timeline of the moot. So it would be around maybe 2-3 months to your memo submission, and then another 2-3 months for your, another month or two maybe for your national rounds, and then 2-3 months for your international rounds. So it's
Hmm.
pretty much a good 9 to 10 month long
Hmm.
uh, process
If
if you're
any, yeah,
all the way.
yeah, yeah. So if anybody is thinking of, investing 9 to 10 months, do you think it's not possible to balance academics and other things when you're in a law school? Do you think it's possible to balance, or do you think it's quite difficult? What was your experience?
See, I think that essentially comes down to what the person is willing, like how much effort the person is willing to put in. For us, although the college did help out with certain relaxations, which I mean, certain relaxations when dealing with these moods is required and is important, and that sort of a push and encouragement should come from the
Like,
college.
I'm guessing attendance would be one of the relaxations.
Attendance relaxations and things like that are a little important when you are participating in such moot court competitions. But even otherwise, if you have a well thought out plan and if your work plan is well set, then you can divide up your hours accordingly. Now, obviously, you will have to sacrifice on a few things like maybe partying and sleeping, but
Mm.
if you're willing to cut down on a few things and then make space accordingly, I think it's very much balanceable. It's
Got it.
not very difficult to do.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Okay. So another question which I have is, uh, a lot of students, when they first start to moot, they are often confused on how they should be forming a moot team. Of course, there is no, given formula. There's no absolute formula which anybody can use to think, or form any moot team. But what do you think? Like, can you give us, the students, some tips on how to form teams and how to not form teams?
So for international moods, I'll just keep it specific to that. I
Yeah.
think one thing I keep advising students who I coach is that at the outset, try and have your roles defined when you're setting the team up. I mean, if you are putting together a team, it has to be based on the certain strengths of the team members. So you need to have your two speakers identified maybe up front, and then researchers who are willing to researchers who are on a similar wavelength maybe as the speakers. I mean, but just having roles predefined before stepping in to moot prep at all. Because one major problem that I've seen with this is that if your roles aren't defined, then inadvertently you will reach that one stage wherein you will have to have speaker challengers, and you will have to figure out the speakers between the existing team members. And in addition to possible squabbles as a result of the uh, full speaker selection process, it also wastes time which you cannot really afford in moods like this. So what helped us at the very outset was that we had our roles clearly defined. Another thing that you have to keep in mind when you're forming a team is that you people should have more or less similar working styles or working times. Like, you can't have a team in which a few members can only work during early morning, a few can only work at late night. So you need to have a balance so that over your 24-hour period, you know that there are people working at some points in time, resting at some points in time. And like I said, it's a 9-10 month long journey that you have to undertake. So it is useful that you do go with people you are a little familiar with, who you know, whose working styles you are aware of. Because in the long haul, I've seen lots of squabbles break out between teams as a result of internal disputes, because this time period is just so long. And
Yeah.
as a result of that, I think you need to keep, like, identify roles most definitely, and other than that, know a little bit about each other's working styles so that you can like bring it together. And
Hmm.
other than that, I think you need relentless people basically.
Yeah. So from your experience, when you were working in full swing for Jessup, approximately how many hours a day were you putting in? When like the time when you were absolutely doing nothing but preparing for Jessup. Like, what was the average number of hours you used to put in as a team?
I think other than maybe an hour for eating and maybe another maybe 4 or 5 hours for sleeping, I think
Hmm.
other than that, the full time we were basically doing pretty much this. So even if we weren't studying anything, it was discussions between people who were awake, or just having discussions. If no one was awake, then reading to yourselves. And so yeah, I mean, I I don't think in the last few fine in the final stretch, I would say that the team as a whole was awake on a 24/7 basis. I mean, at any given point in time, some of us would be awake. So it was something like
So
that.
yeah, so I'm just trying to tell the participants about the dedication which is required if you want to participate in a sophisticated moot court competition. I'm sure that the level of effort goes down with the sophistication of the moot court competition also. So if you don't have a lot of time to dedicate to a moot court competition, then it's advisable to pick up a moot which is first of all, uh, you know, is a tier two or tier three moot, not a moot like Jessup, because that would require, inevitably would require a lot of dedication. Because if there are teams like yours who are preparing, let's say, 18 hours a day, then even if I put in, let's say, 8 to 10 hours, I would still, my chances of winning would still be at risk. So it's always better to assess your situation first and then pick up a moot. Apart from the time investment which every team has to think about, what do you think, and I would also like you to share your experience about the finances which are required for doing moots which require you to go international?
Well, finances, it actually boils down to how much your university is willing to help you out, because these moods can get pretty expensive, mostly because you have to travel, which is
Hmm.
in itself one of the uh,
Hmm.
larger setbacks in terms of money. Other than
Hmm.
that, registration costs are also usually in dollars or pounds, so there
Hmm.
is a little
So
bit.
approximately how much in total did you have to spend for Jessup, including the India rounds and for the international rounds? From like what was the total amount which was spent, irrespective of the reimbursements which you got?
I have it was quite a bit, but I don't think I can put like a number on it.
Okay, okay.
But are like just going there and coming back and staying there, I think
Hmm.
in itself was around around 2 lakhs, I think.
Okay, so I'm guessing the major expenses would be first travel, and then another major expense would be the registration cost. So can you tell me what the registration fee was, if you
Register,
remember?
I think $50, if I'm not $50, I think.
$50. That's not much. Hmm. That's
$50
fine, I think.
per person or something of that sort.
Okay, okay, okay.
But
So I think the main costs boil down to the travel and living costs which are attached to it, right?
yeah, so I think
And also probably printing costs and all of those
printing
miscellaneous
costs,
costs.
all of those are pretty much standard, like it is in your national rounds as well. Those costs
Hmm.
are pretty much the same. I don't think there's a huge difference in terms of that in the international rounds, but it's it more or less boils down to the same. But yeah, in terms of your travel, stay,
Hmm.
and registration, that is pretty much what the bulk of the cost is.
So I'm guessing, although the global pandemic has brought upon a lot of grief to all of us, but I think it's a good, it's a good opportunity for students who are not, willing to shell out that much amount of money right now, because they can get done with a lot of international moot court competitions just in the virtual rounds which are happening these days. So I'm guessing that it's a golden opportunity for a lot of students right now.
Yeah, unfortunately, Jessup got canned this year
Hmm.
because of the pandemic. As a result of which they've decided to keep the theme for next year around the pandemic as well. But
Hmm.
other moots like Stetson and Ox Prize, I think they did happen virtually this year. So
Okay.
yeah, I mean that the teams who would have participated this year, they would have cut down on a lot of the costs,
Hmm.
yes. But
True.
I would say that the full experience of an international moot is better to be have had at the moot instead
Agreed.
of
Agreed.
on a virtual platform. But yeah, I mean,
Agreed.
the opportunity of people participating has
Hmm.
increased, but
Hmm.
the overall experience, I think, is
Hmm.
what the virtual one will lack.
Yeah, I also think the same. So one very important thing which would be very useful to a lot of participants right now is, if if there's any student who's just come in their second year or something like that, and they want to do their first international moot, what are the sort of resources, what are the sort of books which they should look at right now, and especially during this time when it's the lockdown period, what is it that they should start with right now, so that they're prepared with prepared with a good amount of knowledge on international law, let's say maybe after a few months.
So, two books right off the bat. One is Malcolm Shaw, which is pretty much like the holy grail. I mean, if you are going to step in to participate in any of these moots, having read Malcolm Shaw in and out and knowing what is there in Malcolm Shaw is primary. Other than that, you also have Brownlee's Principles of International Law. both of these books are pretty like easily available in most law school libraries,
Hmm.
but and soft copies are a little expensive, but I don't know what the rule for promoting piracy here is, but if
We are all in for the students. So if it's available online, then I
yeah,
would actually suggest students to, be a little resourceful
yeah,
and try to find out where these books are available, so that you are not at a position where somebody else is benefiting and you are not benefiting. If it's available online, then it's better that you get your hands on it. Devan, I'm going to open the chat window so that you can write down the names of the two books which you just told with the
yeah.
proper spelling, so that the students can Google or keep a note of it. And I've also opened the chat box now for questions from the participants. So if you have any questions related to international moots, if you want to ask Debayan about his experience of international moots like Jessup, Oxford Prize Media, then please you can type your question in the chat box right now. Tanya, your question is, other than international moots, how should we start mooting? So I'm guessing that you want to aim for a national moot or a trial advocacy. If that's the case, then do join our webinar, which is happening tomorrow and day after. It's on national moots and on trial advocacy. So you'll get a basic idea on how to start off with national moots. For just like today, Debayan told everyone how to start off with international moot preparation. Then okay, so Debayan, I'm going to take the questions and I'm going to ask you the questions once you're done writing down the names of the books.
Right. Sorry, are you gonna be telling me the questions or
I Yeah, let me actually moderate the questions so that I can give you the specific questions. And yeah, so first of all, everyone, Debayan has written down the names of the books which you guys can start looking at if you want to prepare for international law. Um, so one question I found this question really good by Siddhika, which is how to keep up with the dedication till the end, because it takes a long period of time. Of course, like this is a very general question, but it's a very pertinent question because 10 months of hard work, 10 months of dedication is not easy. So how were you able to keep up the morale of the team and keep up the motivation levels of the team high throughout those 10 months? I'm sure that you must have seen ups and downs throughout those 10 months, but ultimately, what kept you going?
I think the biggest push was the will to win and the will to actually go do something in the competition. And that being said, I mean, all of us had an alternative, uh, at least like an alternative vision, sort of like alternative, what do you call it? Like I'm not getting a word for it, but
Perspective.
not like so one goal would be to like win the competition, and
Hmm.
another goal would be to maybe go see a concert somewhere when
Hmm.
you have made
Oh,
it
you
to
guys
the
actually,
stage.
you guys actually had a very good time in US during
Yeah.
your Jessup rounds.
So looking forward to maybe something other than just your mood
Hmm.
helps keeping that motivation alive. But that being said, at the end of the day,
That's secondary. Huh?
your push needs to come for the
Hmm.
will to do well in the mood. I mean, that's
True.
pretty much the most important, like most useful dedication that you can
Hmm. Hmm.
provide.
Actually, while we were on this topic, how was your trip to US? Like, what were the things which you enjoyed other than participating in the moot court competition?
Unfortunately, getting to the semi-finals meant that our first week more or less went in the competition itself. I mean, had we been knocked out earlier, maybe we would have been able to see around the states a little bit more. But yeah, after that we did, like, since we were all in our final year anyway, and we basically took a call between not attending our farewell and just relaxing a little in the states. So yeah, I mean, it was basically just winding down after 10 months of rigorous hard work. So it was just like a 10 days of, we didn't talk about any international law. We listened to some good music, ate some good food, and drank quite a bit. So yeah, that was pretty much
That's
how
good.
I enjoyed.
That's good to know. Yeah. So Yuvraj has a question, which is, I think he wants to know from your experience what you were thinking when you were doing your first moot. I think the tone of his question is basically, why did you choose an international moot as such? Like, why not a national moot? Why not a domestic law moot?
Well, to be honest, I started out mooting. Like, I know there are questions about first year's mooting, but I started out mooting quite late. I mean, only in my third year did I do my first ever intra. Before that, I was quite terrified of doing moots. And after that, I did do one national moot, which was, I think, in IIT Kharagpur. They have like a small moot on patent laws and IP. So after that moot, I think price media kind of happened by accident. I mean, our researcher at that point in time, he selected the moot. We weren't there. We came back later, and then we were like, okay, now that we've selected it, let's just go with the flow. But that actually helped in setting the tone of wanting to do these moots more. Having done price media once, not done too well, that I think was an important push in wanting to do another moot. That too in my fifth year. And yeah, so I think the first time was a bit of a mistake, but the second you get a hang of what these kind of moods are like, you will want to put in that sort of effort
Got
to
it.
these.
Okay, so 253272 is asking, what are the kind of online resources apart from the books which you obviously mentioned? Is there any online resource which is available to the public, or if there is anything which is available at a minimal cost, which the students can utilize for any international move?
So, a moot like Jessup, for example, along with the reg fees, actually give you limited subscription to some of the research databases like Hein Online and extended version, the US LexisNexis, and for Oxford OPIL, basically Oxford Private Public International Law. So there are a few of these paid databases which you get access to from Jessup at least. The other moods don't really give you that sort of a thing. But yeah, your databases like Manupatra and SEC Online, etc., are not going to be of much use to you for these international moves. JSTOR, on the other hand, JSTOR, Hein Online, LexisNexis, these are definitely better. But all of these, that being said, are all paid sites. A few of the non-paid sites that I have found useful are Worldly, which is WORLDLLL. I'll just type it down.
Would you mind writing it down so that?
Worldly. So if you just go on to Worldly, it gives you across the world case laws and some useful articles on some points. And Worldly is world. So Worldly, Bailey is similarly British and Irish
Okay.
law. NZLII is New Zealand, Australia. So you have these free databases for accessing certain regions across the world. Other than that, your International Court of Justice, the website has all the case laws that you can look for, that you might need. So your, I mean, you can find full text of these cases there. The only thing is, it's usually one page French, one page English. So you'll just have to maybe do a quick sort of the PDF if you just want to read the English part of it. So these are some of the databases which are useful and free.
Can you write down the name of the website which you
I
were?
mean, I'm writing a couple down, but
Yeah.
basically you can you'll find the links to the other ones on these sites itself.
Sure, got it. So Shriya's question was about research. I think this question got answered with the last
Oh, one second.
question.
And one important database that I missed out is good old Google. I mean, uh, make sure that you go all the way till the very last page of your search results when you are searching on Google, because page 30, 35 of Google sometimes produces exceptional gems of information which you may not necessarily find. And just using different keywords on Google itself can help in a lot of ways. So yeah, good old Google is quite important.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the next question is about the moot proposition of competitions like Jessup and William C. Will. Regarding that, actually, I missed out asking on a question, which is uh, how, first of all, how long are these moot propositions? Like, how long was your Jessup moot proposition?
I think our Jessup problem was around 18 to 20 pages long,
Okay,
somewhere around that. Price media is comparatively smaller at around 6, 7 pages, 8 pages
okay.
max. Stetson's a little more at maybe 10 to 12 pages.
Okay, okay.
So
So
yeah,
when you get hold of these moot propositions, and I would categorize these moot propositions in medium to lengthier moot propositions. Um, so what do you do as a team? What's the first step which you undertake? When you get hold of the moot proposition.
so this is something that any team that I coach, I usually make them do this. So once the proposition does come out, I make them read the problem individually for at least a good week or 2 weeks, depending again on the length of the problem, and not discuss it at that point in time with each other, but just keep reading it to yours, like with like on your own. And
Mm-hmm.
at the end of that 1, 2 week period, having a discussion on important points, and then brainstorming on the proposition after having read it a considerable number of times in those first week or 2 weeks, or whatever amount of time you
Mm-hmm.
dedicated for it. And that actually helps in generating a lot of ideas, because each person's mind is then individually working on something, and then collectively when that comes together, it just allows for better discussion to happen. And yeah, at the end of those 2 weeks, I think just keeping on reading the problem and then delineating the facts based on applicant and respondent is also useful, because that will help you out later when you come to drafting arguments for the
Got it. Got it. So Sonu is asking about the qualities which are, essential for any good oralist for a sophisticated international moot court competition. One of the things which I also want you to talk about here is, uh, so I've never done an international moot court competition, but what I've heard is that the speed of Indians when they speak in English is sometimes not comprehensible by foreigners. So does that also come as a barrier sometimes for Indian origin speakers?
I mean, personally, for someone like me, that is why I opted out of going as a speaker for Jessup. And I actually do not like speaking much in moot court competitions, because, yeah, you have to be the demeanor has to be very calm. You have to speak slowly, enunciate properly, because it's not just with Indians, but across the world, accents are different. And if you speak too fast, then there is a tendency of the person in front of you losing out and losing interest in what you're saying. So even for your India rounds, like even now, if I start talking too fast like this, then it will get difficult to follow me, right? So you'll have to moderate your pace little. And for the international rounds, your speed has to be like maybe 20 times slower than what I'm speaking right now. So
For anybody who's interested in finding out how good speakers speak at competitions like Jessup, I think Rag Yadav's speech is available on YouTube or on Vimeo.
It's
Yeah.
there's a small preview of it available on Vimeo, but I think you can purchase it for around
Hmm.
$20 to $25. I think
Got
is
it. Got it. So
similarly
that.
purchase videos of finals of all years. But
Hmm.
some moots like Price Media and Stetson, you will find videos on the internet on YouTube as well.
Hmm. Got it. Got it. So, people who are asking about the websites, of course, Debayan has already written down the names of a few websites which might be useful. Okay, so someone is asking that if, and this happens not just in international moots, I would say, this happens in in every moot court competition. I think this happens. But what has been your, your strategy to deal with any difficult issue, जिसपे your moot team is stuck at, and you can't go beyond a certain level of research, and you think the applicant side is a little dominant and the respondent side is a little weak. So at times like these, what has been your strategy? Have you left the issue where it was and then did you come back to it later, or was it something different?
The way we've done it in the past is that we've all been working on a particular issue. So Jessup had four issues, and there were four team members. So the issues were kind of divided up accordingly, and then we switched at a later stage. So first, when four of us worked on 1, 2, 3, 4 maybe, and then we shifted it up 4, 3, 2, 1. So that way, two people were anyway at any given point in time looking in at the issue. So that allows again for fresh perspective to come in. And other than that, I think when we were getting stuck, I don't know whether that is the right way to do it or not, but we would end up arguing and debating between each other for hours till we could figure out a solution. I mean, this was only at a stage when other issues were also more or less sorted and we were in a position to be able to afford to give time to one particular issue. So yeah, if we were stuck, we would debate it out till that question that had popped up in our head would not
Hmm.
entirely get solved satisfactorily for us at least.
Got it. So again, students who are asking about the resources and the kind of databases which the Debayan can help out with, you can just scroll in the chat box and see the names which Debayan has dropped. Okay, so we've talked about the oralist. Then we go on to different
For
choice email.
orals,
Hmm.
I would also say that it is important to fix up your transcript well in advance to your oral rounds and then give.
Some students might not know the concept of transcript. So if you can just in 10 seconds, 15 seconds tell us what that is.
Right. So one major mistake that most teams make while preparing for your oral arguments is that they tend to base it exactly on what is argued in your memorial. Now you have to differentiate your written submissions from your oral submissions. Everything that is there in the memo in the same structure that is there in the memo, if that is argued out exactly the way it is, then the judge will just be like, I can read your memo. I mean, what are you doing standing here in front of me and reading your memo out to me for? So in order to avoid sounding like that, you have to have a speech in which you put forth your oral arguments, and there has like you follow the same IRAC method for drafting it, but you do not necessarily retain everything that is there in your memorial, but your key arguments are noted down in your transcript, and it is a comprehensive document with all your references pinpointed so that even if you get questions during the rounds, you can refer to your transcript and answer some of those questions. And the only way you'll be able to incorporate these things in your transcripts is by giving rounds to multiple people and giving as many rounds as possible so that you have a bunch of questions that you are ready and prepared to answer. So your level of preparation for an oral round should be such that there shouldn't be a question that is coming at you which you probably have had not thought of in the past. I mean, it shouldn't come out of the blue to you. If it is coming out of the blue, then you can maybe question your level of preparation. I mean,
Got it.
95% of it should be answer it.
Yeah. There would be some questions which you may have not expected, but most of the questions
Yeah.
should be those
Some
questions.
some
Yeah.
questions are just
Hmm.
tricky, and some questions are just mean and dispiriting and
Yeah.
there to just irritate you. So you may not know the answers to that, but yeah, I mean, 90% of it should be under control. That's
Got it. Got
another
it. Got
important aspect of all rounds.
it. Got it. Okay. So another question regarding the mood problem is approximately how many days did you fix up to go through the compromise before you even started drafting? So if you can just give an idea from your experience of Jessup, what was what was the approximate number of days or months?
I think September was when our problem released. August end, September beginning, around somewhere around then. And I think we started drafting only after, I think, about 3 weeks or 4 weeks of the release of the problem. So, like I said, initial few weeks was just reading and brainstorming on the problem. Then we divided our issues, and then we started working on drafting basically. But that was
Okay.
just the first draft.
Okay. So Anirudh's question is regarding traps which are there in Moot problems, and so he's basically asking how to deal with the traps in Moot problem of an international Moot court, and how to differentiate between a trap and filling information. So like what I can understand from his question is what are the sort of things which you should focus more on in the compromise, and I like the basic answer to this question is irrespective of the subject which you are picking up, subject of the moot is not that relevant here. It's more about the material and immaterial facts which are present in the moot proposition. So if you get a good hang of what is relevant, what is material, then you can sort of differentiate the kind of things which you should focus on. Okay, so
Also, just adding on,
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
try not to interpret the facts too much. I mean, don't go into it.
Assumption of
Yeah,
facts,
don't
basically.
assume too much when you're reading the problem. Try to take everything at face value. Ask questions, make notes, but don't assume a lot of things. And there aren't really any traps, but
Hmm.
since the law is so wide, it's always useful to go back and check whether you're following the sources of international law and the hierarchy and all of that to make sure that your argument is foolproof. I mean, you,
Got it.
you tend to get carried away because there is so much that is
Hmm.
there on
And
this.
sometimes you're just lazy, and sometimes you just think that, okay, I probably know about this, when actually you may or may not know about the issue in its entirety. So it's always a good idea not to assume. It's always a good idea to research on something before you come to the conclusion that you definitely know everything about it. That's something which we always teach in our memorial making course also. So people who are with us today, they would have an idea about what we're saying. Tejaswini is asking about the oral round, the difference between oral rounds in international and national moot. So we discussed this in detail in the beginning. So if you've missed that, you can actually check out our Facebook or YouTube channel where this has been streamed, and it will be there for forever. So you can check that out. We have a very good, very basic question. Okay, which is basically for national, for domestic moots, the printouts of cases which you take are from SEC or Manupatra. So what is it the case with international moots? Where do you take out an authentic printout of a case from?
For ICJ, I would suggest, like I mentioned, it's all there on ICJ's official
Hmm.
website. So those cases aren't all that difficult to get a hold of.
Hmm.
Other than that, um, you have some of these credible sources like your OPIL and LexisNexis on which you will find these cases. But even otherwise, I think if you use Bailey or Worldly also, I mean, it won't be discredited. You have to
Hmm.
show the front head note
Hmm.
similar to how you usually take references along. So
Got it.
I don't think there's a hard and fast rule for that.
Got it. So we have a general question, and this, you can just touch upon it very briefly because it's a very very generalized question, which is that international law moot propositions are mostly based on issues which do not have a lot of law settled on it. So how do you sort of back your arguments when there is absolutely no law settled on a particular issue?
So one example that I can give here is our third issue was on the illicit trade in cultural property, which I don't know if anyone is aware, but is apparently a treaty based part of. There's a treaty on it which we had to read, and we realized that there is hardly any material on this law that we have access to, and the issues were quite like all of our issues were, in any case, nothing was settled in international law on those aspects. But I think going in, reading the cases, reading articles written about the debates that have been ongoing, because these issues, yeah, there isn't a settled debate on them, but there is a debate that is going on. So identifying the two sides of the debate, separating it, and then building your arguments based on those debates is essentially what the moot is trying to get you to do. I mean, at the end of the day, it is mock court. You are not actually going to answer, like, you're going to push towards it, but I mean, it's the exercise that is more important. So understanding the debate and then correctly putting forth that debate is what is required in these cases.
Got it. So another question which we have is basically, is there a particular way in which you can divide the issues? Of course, there is no formula, but how did you divide the issues for research between the team, and how did the oralists divide the issue for speaking? And a very, a very important question to an additional question is basically, can you have something like issue number 1 and 3 for speaker number 1, and issue number 2 and 4 for speaker number 2? Is that advisable or not?
So I'll just answer the latter part of the question first. So
Hmm.
that it depends. I mean, if 1 and 3 are in any way connected and 2 and 4 are connected in some way, you if it's seeming easier to argue strategically, then it's a good idea to do it. But I mean, you can change around the order of your, you can restructure the issue as you wish. But common tradition usually is 1 and 2 with the first speaker and 3 and 4 with the second speaker. It's usually a little less confusing for judges. But yeah, if you can figure out a coherent structure for a 1 and 3 and 2 and 4, then you can go ahead and do it. I mean, there isn't anything set in stone that doesn't allow you to do it. But as long as it's not very confusing for the judges who are in front of you. And coming to the first part of the question, wait, with
Which
what?
was basically, how do you divide the issues for research and for drafting between the moot team members?
So I think I'll explain it. Like, I've seen teams, I coach do it differently, but the way we did it was that there were four of us, there were four issues.
Hmm.
We'd already pre-assigned roles, so there were already two speakers and two researchers at the outset before the problem released.
Okay.
That being said, our speakers had already divided, like our first and second speakers were also pre-decided before the mood problem released. So basically, speaker number 1 worked on issue 1 and speaker number 2 worked on issue 3, while the two researchers worked on 2 and 4 respectively. And then we switched it up with speaker number 1 taking issue 2 and one researcher going up to 1, while speaker number 2 went to 4 and the other researcher moved to 3. So that way, one researcher was always engaged with one of the speakers at any given point in time, and as a result, both issues were moving simultaneously. But that being said, I mean, it can be done in several other ways as well. But this was a pretty effective way to do it for us because uh, we basically ended up covering everything in a very foolproof manner.
Okay, got it. Okay, so someone's asking about the format of memorials in international moot court competitions. For this, like you, what you can definitely do is you can check out the best memorials of moot court competitions like Jessup. They're uploaded publicly, so you can get access to them, and then you can see how the format is, how the drafting is done. So I think that we can leave to them itself. Okay,
Just
so.
just
Hmm, yeah,
one thing
yeah.
on that.
Hmm.
When you're reading some of these memorials, try only reading the Indian ones. Don't look at memos from other countries because each country has a different style of drafting, and you may get confused in the different
Okay,
styles of drafting that exist in other countries, basically. So just stick to
okay,
the Indian memos.
okay, okay. Got it. Another question is, should the final draft of Jessup Memorial be ready before the second batch material is provided?
That's that's a very realistic uh, thought, but it's next to impossible to have your
Okay.
final draft ready before your second batch of materials come out because uh, your second batch of so the whole purpose of having the two batch materials is that you try and include as much of the batch materials as you can uh,
Hmm.
for the for your memorial, and on top of that the second batch of materials can be such that it can give you a few articles and spark off a debate that can entirely derail you of whatever
Hmm.
thought you were
True.
earlier taking. So your final draft, at least for Jessup, it's definitely advisable to wait till the two batches of material release and you read both of them thoroughly.
Got it. Okay, so very practical question, and you can probably give your tell about your experience on this. Few tips to stay concentrated for long hours. So, like one of the things which I can like on the top of my mind, I would say that is coffee. But apart from any external substance which you were, consuming for having long concentrated hours, was there any trick which you had? Was there anything which helped you as such?
With a disclaimer that smoking is injurious to health, I would say that it was mostly caffeine and nicotine that did
Yeah,
get us through those long hours. But I mean, other than that, yeah, I think it was just
I
that
think
the
you need to
information
be
that
in a habit, and you guys
yeah,
probably
and
were in a
and
habit.
you have to drive each other to work harder, basically. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if you see someone slacking off, you have to pull them up. If you see that someone's putting in too much effort, you have to tell them to calm down and relax. So you have to take care of your teammates. It's basically a family that
Mm-hmm.
you have to deal with. So that's why team
True.
formation, like we said at the outset, is very, very important.
Yes. Okay, so someone's asking about your fears about moot court competitions which you had till the time you picked up your first moot. So, what was that fear? How did you overcome it? And what made you finally do your first moot court competition?
I think first few years I was just very simply lazy because I
Hmm.
had seen the amount of effort that is required for a moot, and I had already started enjoying debating much more. So I was doing at least two debates every semester, and most of my time used to go in that. So I was not really inclined towards mooting. So the fear was laziness, and then I think in our third year we had some constitutional law moot in which I was just asked a few questions and I was dumbfounded and got hardly any marks as a result. After which I was
Hmm.
like, it's a little scary, so I'm not going to do this. But
Hmm.
yeah, then I think I did the first intra, and once I realized that my if you prepare well enough for the moot, you don't really have a lot to be scared of. I mean,
Hmm.
the judge doesn't know more than you. It should be such that you know more than the judge. So if you've worked hard enough, I mean, there isn't anything to be afraid of, be it a national moot, an international moot, or even your intras. So
Hmm. True. So Tejaswini is asking about how we can develop our intellectual levels which are necessary for participating in an international moot court competition. I know that you've already, talked a lot about that you need to be in a habit of sort of working hard, basically. But on the top of your mind, like if there's any other thing which you can tell, which may benefit Tejaswini and anybody who's wondering how can you bring yourself up to a level where you feel confident that you can participate in an international moot court competition.
I think, like you said, I mean, it's all about reading, and you have to stay up to date on the law. You have to have an interest in the subject. I think one major driving force that comes is interest. I mean, the only one of the reasons I did do Jessup is that the theme for that year revolved around groundwater law, and primarily was, when we'd known back then, it was just groundwater law and a refugee outbreak. So since groundwater law is part of environmental law, which is something I have an interest in, similarly for price media, I have an interest in human rights. So it helps having an interest in the subject area and reading. And since you have that interest, you'll anyway be reading about it. So that confidence does develop as a result.
Got it. Samiksha is asking, are you from any national law university? Yes, he's from National Law University, Odisha, batch of 2017. Another question which is being asked is basically about the batch of materials. First of all, somebody is asking, what is this batch? And then someone else is asking, how can you effectively use the batch materials?
So the batch materials are pretty much, it's only peculiar to Jessup. I mean, I don't think any other moot court competitions have this particular first batch, second batch of materials. At least I'm aware of only Jessup that does it. And so you basically have articles which have some of the key debates, and you have certain case laws which are going to be important in you framing your arguments, which come as part of the batch material. Now, the first set of batch materials releases at least like a month and a half after your problem releases, and the second batch releases are again a similar time period later. So, I think in order to use the first set, you have to first be very clear about the issues that are there in the problem and have had read. So basically, what we used to tell ourselves is that by the time the first batch of materials releases,
Hmm.
there shouldn't be something that is very surprising coming in the batch of materials. I mean, your research in your first 1.5 months, 2 months should be such that you may not have been able to maybe get access to that article, but you've seen it or you've read about it somewhere in the course of your research. And then very realistically, you cannot use everything that is there in in both the batches, because some of those things even we couldn't figure out where they would make sense. So you can leave out some of it, but try and include as much as you can. And the material is such that it's quite easily linkable, barring a few, quite easily linkable to the issues. So
Got it.
yeah.
Got it. Okay, so now we're about to close. I think this is the last question which we are going to take, and this question is actually very very relevant for everybody who's with us right now. How far does international moot court competition decorate an individual's resume and give edge over other law students? How far are moots considered in placements or internships compared to research paper publications? So the more important part of this question is the first part. I know that you've not joined a law firm after law school. You've not joined a lawyer. You're doing something different. You're working in CPR. So, but in general, what is the kind of trend which you have seen? Is there any kind of edge which a student who's done well in Jessup would have over someone who's done well in a national moot court competition?
Um, See, the recognition aspect of it is quite useful. Like the some of these national moots, like you said, they're new. They haven't been around for as long. But with a moot like Jessup that's been going on forever, and with moots like Stetson also, which have Stetson base, these moots have been going on for a really long time, and people have heard of these moots and they know about these moots, so it's easier for them to know that okay, this person has participated in Jessup and has reached the semis of Jessup, and then so he does have a certain set of skills, and so teamwork is one of the essential skills that you gain. Your ability as a researcher improves,
Hmm.
which again, all of these things are very important when you start to work with a lawyer or in a law firm. But yeah, like you said, Anand, I do not have a lot of experience about how you can use these international
Hmm.
moods in order to better your CV. But it is most definitely uh, something that will set you apart in terms of it will give you an edge over other law students because, well, it's just well known, is what
Hmm.
I would say. I
True,
mean,
true. I think ultimately it shows that the student has done a lot of hard work. It reflects on the effort which the student has put in. At the same time, balance. If the student has balanced
yeah,
academics and every other thing, then that's a very good skill. That's a very good thing which the employer can expect from you on the job. So in that respect, it might be it might give you an edge. So yeah, so I think the last thing which is being asked is Gauri is asking if how they can connect with you. I would like to tell Gauri and everyone else who's interested. Debayan is a part of the panel of mentors which we have for the Moot mentorship program run by Memo Pandits, where you can get mentorship for any Moot court competition from a lot of mentors who we have on board with us. I'm sending a link to everyone so that you can peruse through it and see if this is to your liking. So, okay, so one last question, which I think this came up for the second time. That's why I'll have this in. How can you persuade your arguments as reliable when your citation does not come under any sources of international law under Article 48, 38?
okay. If I'm basically by citation, I'm gonna take that as source.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
if your source of argument is based on something that is outside the purview of Article 38, then it does not hold in international law. So you will probably have to reconsider or try and fit it within the ambit of Article 38, because I mean, as vast as international law is, it still follows that those four little things in Article 38. Uh,
Got it.
that's the
Got it.
precursor to it all. So,
Got it. Okay, so thank you so much, Debayan, for taking out your time and helping law students know more about international moot so that tomorrow, when you guys go for good international moot court competitions, you can actually make India proud. We hope the best for all of you. And tomorrow, we have another webinar on national moot court competitions. Priyanka Murli from Jyoti Sagar Associates is going to take the webinar tomorrow. If any one of you is interested in getting a certificate for this webinar or any of the rest or any of the remaining webinars, please contact Lex Auxilium. They will help you out with it. So that's it. Thank you so much, Debayan. It was a lovely session. I hope the students enjoyed it as much as we did. Thank you so much for taking out the time and hope to see you back again in some webinars.
sure thing. Thank you for having me, guys. Hopefully, it was of some use for everyone.
Okay, so students seem happy. They're writing thank you. So let's close this webinar.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, thank you so much. See you guys tomorrow. Whoever is interested, please do attend the webinar tomorrow with the same link which you've used today is going to be used tomorrow. So just log in tomorrow at 7 p.m. for more information on National Moot Court Competition. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye bye.